why they're appropriate for Agile development, and some of the challenges even within Agile development that we have. We start with the basic problem in the software industry. We've got to deliver software, and we deal with challenges of getting that software delivered. Various reports over time from the Standish Group have shown, many people are familiar with this, that on one axis of how the Standish Group looks at things, only 35% of projects are actually successful by their definition of delivering on time with all the features as specified originally. A full 46% are challenged, either are shipping late, which is a common problem in our industry, or shipping under the originally planned set of features, and 19% fail. This is as of the Standish report in 2006. There's been many of these reports over the years. It has gotten better. It's still, as an industry, we have challenges, and we're always wondering the question of why software is late, what can we do about it? In general, Agile development is a bit of a response to being able to better understand the problem, and so I'll get into that a little bit more. As I've been looking and researching this question of why software is late, I came across a very interesting article by Genuchten in 1991 IEEE software. What I found particularly interesting about this article was that the survey that they did, they surveyed general managers and project managers on a set of about 15 possible areas of why the projects were challenged or late. And what I found particularly interesting here is the area where it's different between how the general manager of the organization was viewing the problem and how the project manager was viewing the problem. In many cases, they both thought, yes, exactly, that was a problem. So customer and management changes, we know that's a problem, and having to deal with change is a big problem. They both thought that was a big challenge. The next one down the list was interesting because the project manager was looking at overall complexity and said that was a real problem, whereas the general manager didn't really understand that the complexity, why it would be such a problem that this complexity. But I think those of us involved in projects realize the project manager is that person that's really working with the team and very active in the project. And I tend to find that interesting that they're finding the complexity being a challenge, but we didn't see that from the general manager's perspective. They both realized that, yeah, they probably had unrealistic project plans. They were pushing the teams a little bit too hard. Related to that, I think the staffing problems are probably, the project manager definitely felt they didn't have quite enough people on the team. The general manager wasn't thinking that's quite as big of a problem. But I find this last one is the one I also find particularly interesting, is that the general manager thought the problem was insufficient front-end planning. But the project managers in general thought, no, that wasn't the problem. We did the right level of planning for what we knew. Doing more planning wouldn't have made any difference. I do think it's some of these differences in viewpoints between the general manager and the project manager that was showing up, that has been showing up, and I think continues to show up, that drove a lot of the software development ideas over the past years. And I think it's really the change that has been come forth with Agile development has really been turning the table to empowering the teams to actually own their own destiny and their own schedule, and the fact that they know they have to deal with changes, they know they have to deal with complexity, they don't know they have to deal with planning, and they have to do the right level of planning. So to take a little bit of a diversion, I'm a resident of Houston, Texas, and I find that dealing with software uncertainty, that we have other areas that uncertainty that are very similar, and hurricanes is a particular challenge that those of us that live in the coastal waters. And back as I was putting some of these presentations, in fact, one of the presentations I was doing back in 2005, I was actually almost prevented from going on a trip to an Agile conference because the hurricane was coming, and fortunately had a buffer of 1 day in my trip, so I was able to make it. But otherwise, my flight would have been canceled. But back in 2005, we had a large hurricane, Hurricane Rita. It was a enormous hurricane, Category 5 at the time, and this was just 1 month after Hurricane Katrina. had such devastation in New Orleans, and many of the people from New Orleans had relocated to Houston only to have 1 month later of the threat of a hurricane come in. But one of the things we find in hurricane prediction is again, it's a prediction, and there's uncertainty. This chart here is showing a number of different projections of potential paths of the hurricane from different weather services. And all of these weather services, very reputable organizations, are predicting what they think might be happening as of September 22nd of 2005. And we know one thing about every single one of these predictions, and that is that they're wrong. Right? There's no way that they can be that they will know exactly the information that it's going to be able to predict. They can't. It's unknowable. But what we also know is that the collection of this information is very useful in bounding the area that the hurricane might potentially hit. We have one on the farthest easternmost path is not going to be hitting New Orleans, so those people are not going to be hit again. And on the black line further south, it's probably not going to go as far as Corpus Christi. But the Houston area, which is pretty much right in the middle there, is pretty much a serious at risk. And with such a large hurricane, that could be very, very serious. And as a result, it created a big evacuation of the city. In the end, Houston was very lucky in that the actual path came through and moved to the east of Houston, which made it very minor impact in the area. But what I think from a analogy to the software world is that we have these uncertainties, and we have to understand the amount of predictability that we can have and some of the issues that go into that predictability and the way to deal with that and manage that uncertainty, manage for that uncertainty. Around the same time, the Agile Project Leadership Network was getting started, and I was one of the founders of the Agile Project Leadership Network. And we created a document, the Declaration of Interdependence, of how project leadership is interdependent on team members and how it's interdependent on different values. And there's six values, 6 tenets, and 2 of them are the particular ones that I want to delve into in this presentation. It sort of goes to the overall context that it's a 10, and the 2 pieces that we find are uncertainty, and the comment we made at the time in the declaration was we expect uncertainty and manage for it through iterations, anticipation, and adaptation. And context, which is we improve effectiveness and reliability through situationally specific strategies, processes, and practices. So that's where we're going to go. If we look back at our hurricane example, hurricanes have context too. It's where is it going? Where is it currently? If it's currently in the Gulf of Mexico, we may not have to worry. People on the East Coast don't have to worry so much. If it's currently headed in the direction we saw that headed towards Houston and the area is bounded, and if you're living in the New Orleans or Alabama area, maybe it's not such a problem. Want to know how big it is? A small hurricane tropical depression may not be such a big deal, but if it's a Category 5 hurricane like Rita was, that was a pretty serious thing, and you needed to be cognizant of how type of damage it might do. And as we found out with Hurricane Ike, how large are the swells? That was a recent hurricane that caused quite a bit of damage in the Houston area, Houston, Galveston area. Projects as well have context. Some are quite mature and still kicking around just fine. Some are brand new and have a high degree of uncertainty. Some teams are co-located, and you work directly with your partners. Some are quite complex, have internal high complexity. The area of uncertainty, the one thing that Agile development does so well is rely heavily on feedback and feedback loops that adjust planning to the right level of planning so that you can adjust your plans on the fly and adjust your path on the fly. Just as with a hurricane, each time you have new information, you can create new plans and new information that's highly useful in determining what actions it might be able to take. Same with software projects. Every bit of useful information as you go along in the project is you have yourself at a known state. That's why we continually look for a continually shippable product, you're able to make decisions based on your state and make plans and update accordingly so that you can move forward. So if we look to what we have called the context leadership model, these two areas that I've found that really work well at partitioning project definition are the degree of uncertainty that's present in either the market or the technology, and then the overall project complexity. And we put this together in a four-quadrant matrix ranging from high to low, or from low to high. And in each one of these quadrants, what we've seen is that the project behavior and what's necessary to drive the project appropriately is varied based on where they fit. What I've typically done is an aggregate of looking at uncertainty and complexity and looking at different properties. I've worked with a number of different groups in this area, and each group chooses a different set of attributes that they like to work with and group. But we've always been able to find that in the aggregate, some form of uncertainty and some element of complexity are the drivers that we're looking at. With uncertainty, we look at things like market. Is it a mature market or is it a brand new market? Mature markets, we typically know better what's happening. New markets are totally unknown sometimes. With the technical area, are we using proven technologies or are we using new technologies? How many customers? Do we have one customer, in which case we can work with that customer very closely? Or do we have many customers, in which case we have a more nebulous voice of the customer? Duration, are we looking at weeks, months, or are we looking at something in multiple years? Because the longer the project, the more the opportunity for uncertainty to set in. And then this last item of change is our attitude towards change. Are we trying to control change, or are we trying to create change or embrace change? And so that's a range of how much uncertainty we want to allow to have happen. On the complexity side, we look at issues such as team size. Is it a small team, less than 5, where everyone is knows everyone else, or is it large teams, maybe greater than 100 people? Is it mission critical? Is it something that's speculative that we're trying out, that's a prototype, or is it something that's already business critical or possibly safety critical, in which case we have to manage it appropriately? Team location. Is the team local, where they can communicate with each other on a face-to-face basis, or are they distributed, in which case we have to work more challenges with communication? Team maturity. Is it a new team, or is it a very experienced team that's worked together? That has a big difference. If you give an experienced team something that's complex, they can work through it. New teams oftentimes have more challenges and have to be, you have to balance new people with the experienced people. Domain gaps. This is a big issue for my team. I work in oil and gas exploration, and so some of our developers are domain experts themselves, and some of the developers don't really know the domain at all and need a great deal of help and guidance and more documentation in order to understand what the challenges that they have to develop for. So are there gaps, or are the team all domain experienced with the domain? And then the last one is dependencies. Is it something that's fairly independent, or is it have dependencies on several other teams, several other products? And all of these things can add to overall complexity. If we then look at this on the fourth quadrant with the uncertainty and complexity, if we have low complexity and low uncertainty, I call those projects the sheepdogs. They're well behaved. They're in general well behaved. They're not running all over the place, and they're not particularly complex. And if they're treated well and worked with well, they generally are fairly well behaved. If we look at the move up, we go to the higher uncertainty and still at low complexity. These are COLT. These are oftentimes new products, new projects where they're small. We've kept the team small, but the uncertainty is high, and there's challenges. And this is where we need a lot of agile concepts of iterations and teams, tight teams, in order to make these work very efficiently. So we move move over to the right, we end up with the cows. These are complex, mature markets. Here we need to define the interfaces, because we've got multiple teams working together, and teams need to know how to work, so we need to be defining interfaces that teams work at. We need to be partitioning the project to the teams appropriately so that they can work. We're trying in many cases to keep the uncertainty low, because oftentimes these are also issues that have people that are dependent on them, or they have mature markets where we have to aim for stability. And then we have the particular challenges of the bulls. These are large projects that still have high amounts of uncertainty. So we need the agility in order to handle all of the uncertainty, but we need a degree of process definition and leadership and partitioning of the teams in order to cope with the overall complexity. If we look at these attributes again, one of the things we have discovered is that an insight here is that if we have too much uncertainty or too much complexity, any bit of uncertainty or complexity more than what's appropriate is actually adding risk to the project. Now, risk is not necessarily a bad thing if you understand the amount of risk that you're taking on and why you're taking that risk on. But if you're taking risk on that's unnecessary, or you're looking to try to see what can we do to reduce risk that may be not providing an upside on the market side, then this is a good framework to potentially look at what things might be done. So if we look at a scoring model, we can then say, well, what are some of the opportunities that we could use to reduce uncertainty? Well, one, we could use proven technologies rather than using new technologies. If we're going, so maybe we have a new market, but we still want to use proven technologies in order to go after that, in order to reduce the overall uncertainty. One of the key things as well is reducing project duration. If we can, and this is why Agile development is so appropriate. Agile development about getting releases out more rapidly, doing iterations so that we have more feedback. That's a great way to reduce uncertainty. Get chunks of the application, get chunks of functionality that actually solve real problems in the hands of end users, so that you can find out what the next most important thing is. Often, chopping a project up into multiple releases is a great way to help that uncertainty. On the complexity side, one thing is, if possible, is the secret of no secret is people always look to co-locate the team if possible. Always reduces complexity. The other thing I think we've looked at is breaking the project up into sub-projects. It's a great way to at least control and manage the complexity, and go into that a little bit more. So here's an example that one of my book partners was involved in, the Swiss Stock Exchange. And in this was a large overall, the overall release of the project was quite large. It was, I think, maybe over 200 people involved in it. And so it was a new product, replacing an existing stock exchange solution. The two prior efforts had been made on this, and both had failed, and so this team would come in to try to clean up the mess. If we looked at the overall project, it was large and had a great deal of uncertainty, so it was fitting within the bull category. There were some legacy products, those that just needed to be maintained, and those were treated mostly as sheepdog projects, kept relatively small and not really had a lot of attention to them. On the back end was the matcher, and the server side was actually moderately, it had a relatively low degree of uncertainty. They knew what they needed to do. That was fairly well defined, and based on a combination of how it had been done in prior releases, as well, I think that some of the prior attempts had kept that uncertainty pretty low, but it was still a large project. It was a large part of it. And then the brand new part was the user interface, because they were working with a new solution, new terminals, and so what they did in all of these cases, in the user interface, they ended up building a number of prototype solutions and made sure that they had a they had an on-site trader in order to work with the team. They did a series of 4 different prototypes before they finally came up with the solution that they were going to work with, and they kept the team very, very close together and very focused on that part of it, that part of the solution. On the back end side, they really focused on keeping the automation tests going, making sure that all the interfaces were very well defined so that they could work with the user interface team and pull everything together. And then the overall project was where Pollyanna, my book partner, was involved in pulling together the pieces and keeping the teams coordinated. And one of the things she did was make sure that the teams met regularly and socially to make sure that any issues with the team were ironed out on a regular basis. So if we look at one part of this is partitioning it, the overall program we consider it in the bull category. The user interface was a cult project and partitioned out and managed separately. The server side was a cow project and managed again in a separate way. And then each of the sheepdog projects were kept separately as well. And what I've found in terms of partitioning of project teams is something very similar to what we do in software design, design of loose coupling and strong cohesion. I mean, we're aiming to try to have cohesion, things of very, very similar activities going on within each of the project teams, and also where the have loose coupling so that the interfaces across team boundaries is there will always be those interfaces, but you're trying to aim for not having to have interfaces all the time. You're aiming to have well-defined interfaces, and that's what the loose coupling motto is all about. So look at another case study here is a case of integrating a number of products with Landmark Graphics. And in 1996, Landmark had been in the business of acquiring a number of different companies in the oil and gas industry. And each one of these were typically market leaders in a particular aspect of the oil and gas exploration. But the real value proposition that Landmark was espousing was the ability to integrate all of these products and have one area of the business integrate with another part of the business and throughout the full exploration value chain. So the existing products that had been within the company were primarily, they've been doing okay, they were managed all right. They didn't have a lot of challenges because they didn't have a lot of uncertainty because they've been around and existence within the company. The new acquisitions all had to come into the company fold, had to switch over to fit in with the integration model, and so had much higher uncertainty overall in the way they were being brought into the organization. The key part of the thing that enabled everything was the integration data model, which was a huge part of what enabled the integration and what holding it all together. And that was treated much more as a cow. It was a large project. It was a large team that was working on it with team and identified as very, very mission critical. But it also had to be keeping the uncertainty very carefully. Its approach to change was one of keeping all the teams from bouncing around. If it was making data model changes that was requiring large amounts of changes to the existing products, then they would have been harmed in a certain way. And then overall, the full release was probably about 200 people. The full integration release was a matter of pulling that whole thing together. Now, this is a case of what the leaders did. The leaders were very, very astute about looking at this and saying, if we're going to be integrating software, we need to start by integrating people. So we need to, if our value proposition is really that of putting together software integration, then let's look at what it takes on the people side of things. So they put together an overall program that every new hire coming into the organization went through week-long introduction called Creating the Future. And then from that introduction, where they introduced the new hire into the company's philosophy and purpose and where the value is coming from, there was a series of events. Every Friday at 4 o'clock, there was a weekly get-together, informal get-together at each of the regional offices, where people just got together for 15 minutes of refreshments and occasionally a short presentation. But the key part of this was it was informal. It was an opportunity for people to just butt into one another. And in that process of butting into one another, accidental conversations would happen, and there'd be people meeting things, say, oh, I needed to talk to you about such and such. It was a great opportunity, and a lot of integration issues got dealt with during that, accidentally, but sort of planned accidentally. The other thing that was done was all of the product managers and program managers were brought together quarterly for a face-to-face event. And this was set up to be a 2-day event, which also made sure that there was opportunity for social interaction, and as well, a lot of things happened through that, just getting people together in a face-to-face environment, because this was distributed over four locations. And then annually, we brought together all of the developers and testers and people involved in the development process together for a week-long development conference, where developers shared with each other what they were working on. And it was a great opportunity for developers to learn from one another, see what was happening, and to look for opportunities to do things better. And it was a great way to helping overall integration of the product suite. As a result, Landmark became the industry leader and has retained a strong position as a result of much of the work that was done many years ago. So as we move on, we can see that products often go through a bit of a life cycle. We talked about Colts being oftentimes newer products. If we start from a bit of an idealized perspective, how we'd like to see projects go, and they never always do this, but you start in what I call a skunk, where it's just a prototype. You want to keep it small. You don't need a lot of process. You don't need a lot of structure around it, but you want to get it started. As you get it moving, it moves much more into the Colt category. The uncertainty goes up and most of the reason the uncertainty goes up is because expectations go up, the team size goes up, and you need to manage much more for Colt. As it gets larger, it turns into a bull project, but that's okay because that means it's been successful in the marketplace. Eventually, the uncertainty will die down. It'll migrate more into the cow category, and if it continues on, it moves into the dog category. If we look at the other category case here, we have Colts. We have a project that starts as a skunk, it moves into the Colts, but it never really takes on, and that's okay. As long as it doesn't take on and you move it quickly into the dog category, that can work out just fine. We have a third category, and that's where we try to start a project in the bull category. And we tried that a number of times, and our general experience with that is it's not working very well. If you start the project too large and with a large uncertainty and a large team, it's nowhere near as successful as when we started projects that have been allowed to start much more in the Colt category, start with a small team, and migrate forward into the bull category. Another perspective on this, which I found is after looking at different things, is something that I got from Jeffrey Moore from his book, Dealing with Darwin. And he looked at a different type of four-quadrant diagram, looking at market differentiating and mission criticality. And in this mode, if something is truly market differentiating, well, let's click this next slide. We'll start with starts at the upper corner in the invent category, where it's low mission criticality. It's not out there yet in the mission. It's not out in the market as being something that's necessary, but it is mission critical, or it is market differentiating. Sorry. So initially when it comes out, it wasn't mission critical, but now it is. It becomes over time becomes mission critical. Something like an iPhone, right? When it happened, it wasn't mission critical. Now it's very mission critical. We had moved from the invent category over into the deploy category now, and in the deploy category, it's mission critical and it's also market differentiating. Over time, things like smartphones become less market differentiating and move more into they're still mission critical. Everyone needs one, but they're no longer as much market differentiation. And at that point, you're much more into the manage mode. You're trying you're still in a good position, but you're trying to manage it. And eventually, something becomes no longer mission critical, and it's already not market differentiating. And at that point, you migrate more towards an offload positioning. If I look at this view of things from a software development perspective and the relationship to change, at the beginning, we're trying to actually create change. There's an invention mode. We're trying to create it. Eventually, we move into more of an embrace change. We're trying to adopt to the markets and embrace the changes that are there. Over time, we migrate into the manage mode. We're then looking to control change. We're not keep it under control. And as we're more towards offload, we're trying to eliminate change and reduce our costs as much as possible. And then from a software development approach, in that create change, it may be okay to be ad hoc. It may be that this is the 2 men in the garage mode, and we don't need that something that's more structured is not as critical. Or you take a very light approach to, even lighter approach to some of the Agile structures. Embrace change is a sweet spot for Agile in general, and all of the basic Agile approaches. As we move into the more managed mode, a bit more structure is appropriate. That doesn't mean we can't still be Agile. It's just that we put a little bit more structure and put a little bit more focus on keeping change under control. And as we try to eliminate change, that may be an opportunity to do more outsourcing, reduce costs. Again, that's not the only time that outsourcing is appropriate, but that may be one particular one where outsourcing is a good opportunity. Take a look here now at some of projects that I have ongoing currently within my organization, within my group. I call it the tale of 4 projects, because each one of these projects is working from a little bit different perspective, and we've tweaked it, and we've allowed the team to adjust it, but we've also helped them get started in what works out for them. So we have one project that's a relatively mature project, now around for about 10 years or so. It's a very small co-located team. It's been the same team for several releases. The developers really understand the domain, so they're pretty much experts in the area. They know it really well. They talk to each other regularly, and in this case, we've gone pretty much iterationless. It's not we just work on the highest priority features and make sure that we have a very stable version at pretty much all times. So it's fits into a little bit of the a lightweight Kanban model for those of you that are familiar with Kanban. The Colt project that we have is a new product. In this case, it has weekly iterations and more structured planning on each week. It has a co-located team, and it has a very active product owner. The product owner is working very actively with the developers, with the tester, does a lot of testing himself, and has been very, very active in driving the direction of this product. And it's been quite successful at delivering on what, and very, very responsive in the marketplace to this product. Related to, these all are related projects, so on the cow side, we have some relatively mature product with one dominant customer. It's about a 20-member distributed team. They use 3-week iterations, so longer iterations than for the Colt project. It has significant automation testing in order to maintain stability. A test suite that has been built up over many, many years and provides high reliability that the product remains stable. And then the overall these are all connected. We have an overall complete release. One of the things we did that I guess is a bit unusual, because of the particular size of this overall release, we had two project managers for all that worked with all of the different teams, and we tended to pair them up so that we'd have a lead project manager on one, and the other one would be the assistant on that project. And this worked out really, really well in pulling together the overall integration of the project, so that and also helped with backup, so that we had two people that always knew what was going on. So that was sort of maybe unusual in that it worked for the size of the teams that we had, but it was something that was a bit of an unexpected result. We thought we would just try it out, and it worked really well. And then overall, we had we worked with frequently integrating the teams, at least nightly, if not more frequently, to make sure that the overall release was in a constantly high quality, potentially shippable state. Just a slightly different view of this. Again, the teams range from being local to global. The iteration meetings, the Scrum teams, for the larger team, they decided that they wanted to see if they could get by with having, rather than having daily Scrums, if they could have just Scrums on Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. Some people will say that's a sacrosanct, you can't change that, but teams, we told the team, if it works for you and you're still able to deliver on your commitments, then that's okay, and that worked out quite well. They're happy now, and they're delivering. They're very, very effective at delivering. Different types of iterations depending upon the response. In the case of the cold, it tend to be to deal with the uncertainty. 1 week was better. For the cow, because of the more keeping things stable and the duration of the activities, 3 weeks seemed to be a better fit. And in all cases, testing is a key part of it, but just how the testing got done varied a little bit depending upon the type of project. So we move into another element of this is sort of leadership development. 4 aspects of if we look at things that are necessary competencies, if we say for leaders, are dealing with people, dealing with process, dealing with technology, and dealing with business, and how these four elements relate to the model, the context model, is that what I've found is that the business and technology are typically the places where the uncertainty is the source of the uncertainty, whereas the source of the complexity is often more from people and process. And what I've found from a personality perspective or from a competency perspective is that some people are much better at dealing with people and process, and some people are much better at dealing with the business and the technology. And those that tend to be better at dealing with business and technology are oftentimes the best leaders for cult-style projects, and those that are strong at people and process tend to be those that are stronger at leading cows. The bulls, are the number of people that can actually lead bull projects well is limited by needing to have a good mix of ability to deal with business, technology, and the people and process. Sometimes what I've found, in order to help develop maybe somebody who's really strong at leading cow-type projects, is give them leadership roles on some cult projects to understand, to get better handle on the uncertainty, so that it can help them as they migrate towards being able to deal with some of the bull projects, and vice versa with that. Because I guess as you look at an overall portfolio of projects, you're going to have a scattering of projects throughout your organization that map onto this. And the challenge that I think we find is that there are a limited number of strong leaders that can lead the high complexity, high uncertainty projects, the bulls, and you don't want to have more of those projects in your portfolio than you have the capacity to lead them appropriately. You want to have a good smattering of cult projects, because these are often new projects that are generating new business opportunities. And hopefully, for any around for a while, they'll have a good smattering of cow projects that are keeping the organization, the business the organization has developed. And it's perfectly fine to have a large percentage of sheepdog projects because, you know, if you can shrink them down appropriately, they can be very effective projects and don't require a large amount of overhead. So towards wrapping up a little bit, I mean, the overall element we're looking for is great leadership. This is a huge part of that is creating a place where people want to be and not have to be, and also making sure that everyone has what they need to succeed. With that, I sort of wrap up and provide my contact information and information on the book that I've written with Pollyanna Pixton, Neil Nicolaisen, and Kent McDonald, called Stand Back and Deliver. It's about overall what the context leadership model is one of the contents of that book. We also talk a great deal about purpose and how purpose plays a role in the business and focus on the business, and on collaboration and how collaboration and leadership work together to, I guess the essence of it is standing back and delivering, knowing when to stand up and lead, when to stand back and let the team do what they need to. My contact information, email is up there. I put most of my presentations out on my website, toddlittleweb.com, and my book partner information, my book partners put a lot of information out on excelanova.com. With that, Hemant, I think move it back to you.
Thank you, Todd. This was very helpful overall structure to allow us to think how to think about various software projects and bucket them in a way that we can meaningfully manage them. So with that, audience, as usual, let's take a few minutes. I have a few questions already from you. If you have any further questions as you reflect upon what Todd just presented in helping through the context-based leadership, please put those questions into the Q&A panel, and I'll pick some of these questions which are more broadly applicable and bring them up with Todd to answer in a few minutes. And while you are thinking about the questions, let me take a few minutes and just introduce us to you guys, those of you who may not know us. So I'll just take a couple pages to talk about Synergip. So Synergip, in a nutshell, we are a software services partner for small to mid-sized technology companies, and the emphasis is on the word partner. We work in a partnership model because, as you know, software is difficult enough to deliver, and partnership is the best way to deliver good quality software. We stay focused on small to mid-sized clients because that's where we have most of the value impact that we can make. For each client, we put together a dedicated high-caliber team, and which serves as an extension of their local teams. So they may have a small local team here and then an additional team with us, which is their ongoing team for software development. But we're not really a staff augmentation type company. We're a lot more involved in working with our clients in determining what to build and how to build. So we are really a development partner for our clients. And we believe because of our deep understanding of software development process and people side of it, we are actually able to reduce the risk. So just as Todd covered in his presentation, you got to understand what category of project you are, whether you are a sheepdog versus colt versus bulls versus cow, and that's a good way to kind of think about various software project complexity and uncertainty, and using the appropriate level of software development discipline to deliver each project to its maximum business value. And that's what we help our clients do and reduce the risk. We're working closely with them. We are big believers of Agile along the way, and we can pick and choose the right Agile techniques to apply for each category of project that is appropriate for that project. And then in addition to reducing the risk, we actually are very effective in reducing the cost by using a dual shore team. We have a development center in India, which has very high caliber development professionals, development and test professionals, and we have small team on the US side, which serves as a product manager and product owner function. So with the dual shore team, we are really able to offer both the reduced risk and reduced cost, typically 50% cost advantage we are able to provide to our clients. And finally, in addition to reduce risk and reduce cost, we provide our clients a long-term option flexibility, and those clients who really want to have a potential for for converting their offshore operation with us in India into their own captive operation. We allow our clients to actually convert into what is known as a build, operate, transfer, so they can have their cake and eat it too. So they can start the offshore development work with us with the low risk and high productivity and economic advantage. And over time, as the team grows and as the business imperatives require them to have their own operation in India, they can take the same team and convert it into their own operation. So that works for our clients. So that's Synergip in a nutshell. And here's a page which just gives you a glimpse of some of our customers, not all, but some of them. Just to give you an idea, almost all our customers, as you see from this page, are small to mid-sized companies. It's, some bias towards Texas, Dallas, Austin, Houston, but we do have customers in the Bay Area as well as the East Coast, so this across the nation. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say about Synergip. Let's kind of switch gears into Q&A. So I have some questions here. So Todd, if you're ready, I'll go through, pick a few questions that are more generally applicable to the audience in this webinar.
Okay.
So let's take the first question here, which is, you went through a categorization of the projects, which is helpful, quite helpful actually. Can you provide guidance on some specific agile practices that one ought to really emphasize in each of those categories to follow, and those maybe one should avoid? And I know you had some guidance on one page where you talked about the team size and co-located or not and all that, but beyond those, any specific agile practices that you think work well in each bucket, each category of these projects, and those that don't?
Okay. Well, and I guess I'm an Agile advocate in general, so even regardless of which quadrant you're in, I'm strongly advocating Agile practices that are appropriate. It's just tailoring it and working with the team is appropriate. I do see that the iteration length for COLT projects tends to be shorter. The customer involvement in the projects that have higher degrees of uncertainty is absolutely critical. Oftentimes, one of the things I guess I didn't cover as well with the cow project, and particularly if you have a situation where you have a smaller number of customers, one of the things that we've worked very carefully, since we had one dominant customer in the cow project, is that we met regularly with that customer and we got clear acceptance tests from that customer fairly early on. And so we worked continuously to understand what they understood to be acceptance tests, what they understood to be done right on a very, very regular basis. So customer involvement was critical across the board, but the shape of the customer involvement may depend on which quadrant. In our case of our COLT project, it was more an internal product owner that was driving that, whereas in the other case, it was more dealing with end user customers, and that was because of the uncertainty in the style of it. In one case, we're trying to create a market. In the other case, we're trying to work with a market that's already in existence. Some of the other things, the style of automation testing may vary depending upon where you're at within the life cycle, and that was what we found. Obviously, we want to drive towards a general test-driven development works well across the board. Depends on when you got involved in test-driven development and how much technical debt you have, but driving the technical debt out in general has been a key part of our ability to deliver. I think the case with some of the challenges that we have with bulls is that you really need to work on getting overall ownership of the product from the entire group, and so that means bringing people together, really focus on communication and ownership across the board, because what happens sometimes is you get ownership at the individual team level, but not ownership of the whole. And that's a big part where alignment with purpose is really critical. So as I indicated, where at Landmark, we made sure that everyone understood that integration was important and meaningful. Across the company, we all knew integration mattered, and the purpose of the organization was driven by that. So people would work on their own team, but they would also have ownership across what the company was
Let's take another question which came in early in the presentation. You were talking about the hurricane example, and you drove home the thought around doing constant planning versus doing all the planning up front, right? So
yes.
Traditionally what happens is when you do all the planning up front, you end up measuring the success of a project based on how the actuals came out versus the original plan. And that's the success criteria of conformance to the plan. But when you do constant planning, what are the appropriate success criteria? Because you're constantly changing based on your perceived new information around uncertainty and complexity. So what should be the success criteria that should be used then?
Yeah, and that's a really good question, because you have the plan, you can measure it, and so that's what happens is people measure against it. But whether that actually made any difference to the business is where the real challenge. So what I'm always looking for is trying to get as close as I can possibly get to success criteria being driven by what impact it has on the business. In different organizations, that changes. That becomes more easy or less easy. And I've spent most of my career in a software product company. In a software product company where we sell product to the marketplace, we have a fairly good feedback loop in terms of how well the product does in the marketplace to learn whether we had been successful or not. The downside of that is we don't know. There's a delay in it as to how quickly we could learn that. But still, there's a tie, and there's direct feedback from a customer. So I think in general, I like the idea of moving towards customer satisfaction as a stronger metric of project success than any sort of conformance to plan or how fast it got done or anything of that sort. So something that's much less internally looking and much more externally looking.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Let's take another general question also here now. You talked about these two dimensions. Can you shed a little more light on how do you use them in a kind of a proactive way for risk management? If you are a VP of engineering or a software development leader in your organization and you have a number of projects like you do in your situation, how do you use this framework to manage your risk?
So I alluded to that a little bit. What you're always looking for is what's the appropriate level of risk that will bring the value proposition that you're out to go get. If you're going after a new market and you want to do so with and you feel like you've got to do that with new technologies, then that's an appropriate level of risk. But you might be able to get the same end result. You might be able to solve the same problems by looking at each one of these potential attributes and saying, well, could I change something about the project, refocus it, and use that to reduce risk? In the book, I go through with each one of the different attributes and give examples of how you might do that. As I said, you could look at technical. Can you reduce and use the proven technologies rather than going out with new technologies? Can you cut the duration? Can you take a different approach to change for a short period of time? Cut back on, not allow so much change if uncertainty is really a concern, but you cut the duration short as well, and then adapt as you go forward. So all of these techniques are appropriate for possibly looking to see what you can do to manage or have the appropriate level of risk. On the complexity side, again, why is it that you're working with a number of different remote teams? Do you understand? I think the thing that I look at with risk is, do you understand the risk that you're absorbing in order to do this? And if so, if that's okay, then fine. But maybe there's something you could do that might possibly reduce that risk. Maybe rather than having 3 distributed sites working on the same thing, maybe it'd be better to just choose one and say this site's going to be the primary site that we're going to have work on this, and they have the right people, and we'll make it work.
Yeah, that's another question. In the organization, when you're following this categorization back of your mind, and how explicit are you, and is there any kind of a downside of using this nomenclature itself of sheepdog, bull, cow, and colt, when you talk to the team members who are so one team being categorized as a colt versus another one being bull, I mean, how do you manage that in the organization, this labeling of the teams and as they evolve from one category to perhaps another over time? Is there any guidance on to managers as to how they should handle that?
You know, we haven't been, oftentimes with the team, we haven't really been explicit about it. We just sort of evolved to it. This is more of a template and framework to work from, and the labels. And sometimes when we're working with teams, they'll use the labels and they'll say, oh yeah, we're a cult team and we need to work this way. Other times we don't even use the labels. But we allow the teams to migrate to that direction, and we coach them along the lines of this is the type of project you have, and this is how we ought to set it up. So it depends on how. I think it's really a matter of fitting into the context of the teams and what works within the culture of the organization as well. Some teams we found that they really latch into it and they really like using the model, and it gives them a vocabulary they can use, and others it just sort of fits naturally in, and they just evolve utilizing it as appropriate.
Okay.
It's a very lightweight approach and it doesn't take, teams can pick it up very quickly. That's the nice thing about it.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Todd, for running this presentation and walking us through this framework. This is very helpful. I hope our audience enjoyed it, and thanks for taking the time. So for the audience, we will have the document posted on our website as usual, and Todd already gave you the contact information also, so you can get hold of it in multiple ways. And of course, you have access to the book all the time. So thank you again, Todd, and thanks all of you for joining the webinar today. We'll see you next month.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye-bye.